Well, welcome to our Zoom meeting. And as you know, on these meetings, we just talk to people about their lives and how God is impacting their lives, and just a bit about themselves, of course. I mean, everybody knows from reading Wikipedia right, about you that your life. You had broadcasting, very good career. But tell us how it all began. I mean, what was your upbringing like, and where you came from originally?
So I grew up the son of a vicar. My dad was a Church of England vicar, so we were a Norfolk-based family for the first 10 years of life, and then I headed down to Surrey, where Dad took over a church there, and then I think TV-wise, broadcasting-wise, I watched Blue Peter as a kid, loved it, just thought it was just an amazing program full of adventure, and I often used to sit there and think that would be an amazing program to work on, but I never ever thought at that stage that I'd one day end up working on it. But it was really at university. So I went to Birmingham University to study history, media studies as a course. There are hundreds of media studies courses out there now, but back in 1992, there were very few. So a little bit of advice from someone called Jeremy Vine, whose family used to worship at my dad's church, and he was in Radio 4 at the time. Of course, now he's on Radio 2 and does lots of other stuff. But he just said, just get a degree, and if you can get experience at university in broadcasting, do that. So we had an internal TV station at Birmingham University called Guild TV. Nobody watched it, literally nobody watched it. It was on in all the bars in the various clubs in the Guild. And I started doing a program on a Friday just called The Lunchbox. It was a fun magazine show, hour long, with one other presenter. But the amazing thing is that they'd got a lot of secondhand TV equipment from a studio down the road called Pebble Mill. Now, some of you of a certain generation will remember Pebble Mill. It's where all the BBC's morning output used to come from. So over the years, they'd amassed all this secondhand equipment. So we had a proper studio, 3 cameras, and it got you used to what it's actually like to do live TV, to have someone chatting in your ear while you're talking. And yeah, no one's watching it. But actually, I caught the bug. And as I came to leave university, someone said, you really should try this for a job. And so I came out of university, and to cut a very long story short, but I aimed for Blue Peter, and I gave myself 3.5 years. I remember, from a Christian point of view, a really vivid moment. I was back in Beccles, where my parents were living at the time. They'd moved from Surrey to Suffolk, and that was Dad's last church before he retired. And I remember one afternoon I was sat there thinking, is this just a dream that I'm going to chase, or is God in this? And I always think, as a Christian, it's always quite a good idea to involve God in big decisions. So I prayed about it that afternoon, and I sort of thought, I'm just going to be really bold and say, God, just give me a sign that I'm not about to waste the next 3 years of my life chasing a dream that's never going to come to fruition. So I said my prayer, and then a while later I went down to my dad's study at a desk a little bit like where I'm sat now. And I was about to start writing letters on his computer to lots of different production companies, to Blue Peter and other programs, to try and get some work experience, try and get a running job. And I just noticed this magazine, and I think it was called the Alpha magazine, but I don't think it was actually connected with what we now know as the Alpha course. And on the front cover, one of the sub-headlines of the articles inside was "Why We Need More Christians in the Media." I was like, goodness me. So I opened this magazine, and it'd been actually written by a guy called Steve Chalk and Pam Rhodes, who was presenting on BBC's Songs of Praise at the time. And it was like one of those moments where, I don't know if you've sat in church or at a Christian event, wherever it might be, when someone does a talk, and you occasionally get those moments where it feels like that talk is just being aimed at you. And it was like this article had just been written to me, and it was why we need more Christians in the mainstream media. It's okay having magazines and Christian radio stations, but we also need Christians in the mainstream media. And I just thought, that's my answer. So for the next 3 years, I chased it down. I tried applying for the job 2 times, got absolutely nowhere, got that letter that comes back, says keep your details on file. Anybody who knows anything about TV knows that's a no, just a polite way of putting it. And then in 1999, through unfortunate circumstances for him, one of their presenters, Richard Bacon, got sacked in very famous circumstances.
I remember it well, actually.
Yeah, and there was an opening, and I thought, this is it. I'm going to give it one last roll of the dice. I'm going to try one final time. And after a long process of an interview and then eventually an audition, I got the job. So that in a nutshell is how I went from being a little boy growing up in Norfolk to becoming Blue Peter's 27th presenter.
I mean, you said yourself, that Blue Peter was iconic and everybody wants to be on it and do things on it. I mean, did you ever dream when you were going to school and you were a kid that you would actually do it?
No. I just thought, I used to watch it and think that would be an amazing thing to do for a job, to get paid to travel the world, to try a lot of different experiences that people either pay very, very good money for or will never get the chance to do. And that was your daily life. You never knowing from one week to the next. Yes, you knew when you were in the studio what the live shows were, but in terms of films, never quite knowing what the next week was going to bring. And it could mean suddenly a trip abroad out of the blue. I remember getting to the end of a summer holiday a few years ago. I knew already I was going to Belize to dive something called the Blue Hole. So I was very excited about that trip. As going back to work in September goes, a trip to Belize isn't bad. And then literally a day later, as I was getting ready for this filming trip in 10 days' time, there's a new film coming out made by Pixar called Finding Nemo. And it's all about this fish that lives on the Great Barrier Reef in Australia. And we want to do a whole film on it. So you're the only presenter who can dive. So would you mind going to Australia before you go to Belize? So 2 days later, you're getting on a plane to go and dive the Barrier Reef for 3 days. That's the dream job, which is why so many people wanted to do it.
Very exciting. Before you landed the Blue Peter job, did you have a plan B? I mean, was there a career path you had in mind that you wanted to be maybe an engineer or a teacher or something like that?
That's a very good question.
Or maybe go into ministry after your dad.
Yeah, I've had that mentioned a few times, but I definitely think it's a calling, not following the family trade. So I haven't felt that call yet. No, the honest answer is I didn't have a firm plan B. So I've often wondered, well, what would life have looked like had that moment in '99 not come about? The question of what would have happened is one in life that we can ask ourselves many times, because ultimately, as C.S. Lewis says in the Chronicles of Narnia, and Aslan used to say, the story of what would have happened has never, ever been told. So ultimately, I don't know. I mean, I worked in Selfridges for 2 years after coming out of university to pay the bills whilst trying to get media experience. I don't think I'd have ended up at Selfridges long term. I mean, I nearly went for the police force, but due to a dodgy knee, didn't get anywhere. So, George, the honest answer is I have no idea what I'd have done if this hadn't worked out.
Hey, good. Thing is, of course, on Blue Peter, and you've landed the iconic. How did you actually feel when you got the words that you've got the job?
Without doubt, the most exciting but surreal moment ever in life. So I'm sure there's some people watching this from elsewhere who probably thinking, "What? I don't understand this program at all." But it's been on air for 60 years, and it's an iconic, as you mentioned, BBC show. And when you get the job, I remember walking out as she was the head of children's at the BBC at the time. And this appointment was really important because of what had happened to Richard Bacon. There was always going to be a lot of media interest in who was going to replace the guy who's got sacked for taking cocaine. And they wanted to get it right. So it was a very long process. But I remember that night, and she cracked open a bottle of champagne. I had a glass of champagne with her and the editor of the programme. And then I was told you can't tell anybody for the next 3 weeks because we want to try and protect you and your family. So just please only tell your close family. But as I walked out her office, there on the wall is all the pictures of the 26 previous presenters. And you kind of looked at it and thought, I've just joined the most exclusive club in the land. I'm the 27th member. There's never been any more than 27. And that's just a really surreal moment. I remember standing at the tube station in Wood Lane, just outside the BBC, and thinking, I can't really tell anybody, but this is going to change my life. It really is going to change everything. And it was, without doubt, the most surreal and exciting moment of life thus far.
Did you think at that point, wow, I've made it. I've made the BBC.
Yeah, I did a little bit. I remember sort of looking as I walked out of Television Centre, as it was then. Obviously, it's changed now. But just looking behind me and on the side of, it's a very famous logo that people have seen on the side of the building, which is Studio One, this huge studio where I did my audition. And just seeing BBC Television Centre as I sort of looked back and thought, crikey, that's now my office. That's where I'm going to be working. And for so long, it felt like those gates would never be prized open, that I'd never be someone walking in with the lanyard and the little pass that says BBC with your photo on it, which a lot of people, if I'm honest, used to wear with great pride on the tube, just to let everyone know sitting around them that they worked for the BBC. But yes, it was a magnificent moment to think, crikey, I've just become a BBC presenter.
Jesus is coming. I can't wait to hear the trumpet call. He's coming. Jesus is coming. And when he comes, we'll crown him Lord of all.
here I am as a kid growing and playing football and cricket, and I was equally as good at both sports. And by the time I'm 16, I'm now representing Natal, which was one of the provinces that played in the Currie Cup. I think rugby still has Currie Cup. Football in South Africa doesn't. And I played in that, and we won it. And I was always what we call in South Africa the lighty, the youngest, slimmest, doesn't carry the big body stuff, like we see today on EPL football games. And there I am winning this championship, and I'm going, right, I know where I'm going. I'm 15, 16, not even 16, and I'm going, bam, I know where I'm going. I played cricket for my school at New Forest. I was the youngest player to ever play first team cricket in high school. The gentleman, Mr. Douglas, who was the coach of the team, had come and watch the lighties play, the little guys at school. And what he saw was me, a left-handed batsman who could cart the ball all over the place. And first slip, he didn't have a first slip, so he just found one. The ball came off the bat at about 150 miles an hour, and I dived off to the left, and there I was with a ball in my hand. That close your eyes and just go. You look good anyway when you do it. And so that's what happened. And all through this, I look back now, God guiding my steps. My relationship with my father was, he's an international footballer, and was very limited. I went out with him twice in my whole life. He took me out under severe pressure from my mother once because I was a very, very good snooker player, billiard player. Very good. I hustled when I was a teenager. I made a lot of money doing it in South Africa. This is my growing up youth style. And I was this way when I was 6 years old. And when I look back, it kind of frightens me, actually. And I'm so grateful God took care of me. And I was called from before the foundation of the world because I could have been somewhere else doing everything different. And here I am diving for this thing. Up comes this coach, tells me, you're on my team. And I'm looking around thinking he's talking to somebody else behind me. I'm the youngest kid. I think I was 13 or something, but he needed what I had. And getting back to my dad now, we never had a relationship. He never, ever came and watched me play. And that was okay for a while, but when he was dying, what I believe is asbestos poisoning, more than a lot of people thought it was cancer. It was just asbestos poisoning. He worked in a blanket factory as a foreman. And, in those days, I didn't know anything about asbestos. And for 9 months, I watched him die, take care of him. And I asked him once, I said, why didn't you ever come and watch me play? Because I made my break into the first team professionally as an amateur. I was still playing under 19. I was 18 years old. And he said, if you make it, I'll read about you in the papers. I said, I thank you for the answer. I walked out and I went surfing. That was another thing I did. That was what you call today my safe space. I went out, I'd surf, I would relax, kept me quiet. I did that when I turned pro as well in South Africa. But I appreciated the answer. We spent 2 times. I went to play snooker with him at the Union Club in Durban after my mother, who I'd never heard raise her voice once in my whole life, just pummeled him. And he said, I can just imagine my dad going, I better take him. I don't think I'll be alive tomorrow. And off we went. And being very, very good at this game, snooker and Kelly's pool and billiards, all his buddies are there. It's a men's club where you play pool and billiards and snooker. And of course, they'd have their drinks. I'm 15, 16 now. And here I am. They were amazed that they saw me. And being a Springbok international soccer player, nobody asked any questions of a 15, 16-year-old going in. Go on in, Norman Smethurst, that's his son. And here I am, they want to play me. They watch me play my dad first, and I beat the smithereens out of him. And then they wanted to play me. So I'm lined up for about 10 games this night. I'm 15, 16. I know I'm not going to school tomorrow, so this is brilliant. I'm looking at all this stuff. This is how my brain operated. And I beat them all. Of course, they loved it, and off I went. But that was the main time I ever went out with my dad. The first time was to go fishing when I was 7. The only thing I caught was a severe cold. And that is not a joke. I went home with a next morning. The good news is I got off school. So that's brilliant. I said, I passed. Severe cold. From that point on, you can guess how I felt about fishing. Sorry, all the fishermen tonight. But that's my youth. Sports, very little time with my dad. Or my mum. She worked very hard. She worked in a bank for what we used to call donkey's years, a long, long time. And she would come home late. I never saw my dad late. No TV in those days. Can't go watching TV. Had a radio that got turned off at about 8 o'clock, so I was already in bed. And my dad would always come back late anyway. He went off to what was called the Wanderers Club near our house and met his buddies there. So I didn't see them much. And I grew up fending for myself. But sports was my safe space. I knew it as a kid, and I was very good at it.
He's coming. Jesus is
Life Stories.
You found me once I was lost, but now I'm found. You love me, you love me. You broke the chains that held me down. You healed me. Once I was blind, but now I see. You freed me, you freed me. What you did at Calvary. Thank you for the cross. You are stronger than sin. You're the cure for my disease.
Well, good evening. Welcome to Monday Night Live Stories on Zoom. We've got an exciting testimony for you tonight. We have an ex-football player for the Americans who are watching tonight. He's an ex-soccer player. This is a real game, and you're going to be hearing a story from Bruce Dyer tonight. This program is being it's been streamed on live on Facebook. So if you're on Facebook, please look for LifeStories BMF and let other people know about this. At the end of the evening, there'll be time for questions. If you're on Zoom, you can send a question to Paul Fenton. If you're on Facebook, you can do it on the page, on the Facebook page, send a question. And so tonight, as I said, we've got a wonderful story. Bruce Dyer, who was the youngest teenage millionaire transfer to the Premier League, played for Watford, and first of all, and he'll tell you more about it, but he has a story of choices that he made in his life. And you may not be a football fan tonight, but I'm sure you will still be blessed and encouraged by what Bruce has to share. So Bruce, I'm going to hand over to you now to come and share your life story. We welcome you to Zoom tonight. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Just to make sure, if everyone can hear me, if you just give me a thumbs up to make sure you can hear my voice clearly.
A bit louder.
Fantastic. It's such an honour and a privilege to be able to share my story. I've got a lot of respect for the guys at Life Story, the BMF, Alan, Paul. You know, over this last 12 months, you know, we've built a really good relationship. You know, I really appreciate the work that you guys do for the Lord in terms of preaching the gospel. It's fantastic, and it's a real pleasure and an honour for me just to share my life story. It's been a really interesting one, and you know, I never get bored of sharing it really, and the reason being, even watching those goals, I never get bored of watching those goals, because it's really a good reminder to me. Whenever I do this talk, I have a theme, and that theme is making the right choices. Life is about making the right choices. You know, we live and die by the choices we make. You know, the future we have is determined by the choices we make on a weekly, monthly, yearly basis. And so I get the pleasure of doing this talk in schools, in prisons, to business people, in churches, because life choices are important. No matter what line of work you're in, you know, decisions are important. And I want to kind of share about two choices that have profoundly, I mean, really changed my life. I grew up in the East End of London. I'm from a family of 5. And I'd probably say from 9, 10, you know, I played football at home. I played football at school. I smashed my house windows with a football. It was quite evident from a really young age that I was passionate about football. And whenever I do this in schools, I always encourage kids that your passion will tell you a lot about your destiny and your future. And I was really passionate about football. And then at the age of 12, I got recommended to Watford Football Club, and so I went on trial. I played for them on trial. They watched me play for my school, and at the age of 13 I signed forms. Back then they were called schoolboy forms. Nowadays it's called, you'd look at it as like an academy player. So I signed when I was 13. I signed for 2 years, and then at the age of 15 I was actually going to stop playing football. And the reason being, there's a Bible verse that I get to communicate this message in school. So if I go into a school's not necessarily wanting me to preach the gospel. They just want me to share my life story.
He's coming. Jesus is coming. I can't wait to hear the trumpet call. He's coming. Jesus is coming, and when he comes, we'll crown him Lord.